On Wednesday night, the 29th of September, our parish council met. For those of you who do not know who's on parish council, I chair it. Graham Roberts from our 8:30 congregation is a part of it. And from our 10:30 congregation, we have Morris Daniel and Michael Williams, who are also a part of it. Most of our meeting was spent figuring out how we as a church emerge out of lockdown. And I must say, first of all, I'm really, really excited about the fact that soon we are going to be able to start meeting together again as the people of God. I have really, really missed gathering together with you all, and so I'm really, really looking forward to that. But I must say that this whole issue of emerging out of lockdown has probably been one of the most perplexing issues I've ever had to deal with in pastoral ministry. Why? Well, because there are two competing priorities that we've had to consider as we work through these matters. The first priority is the one that I would call inclusion of all. Our Lord Jesus Christ welcomed all. He was happy to go to the unclean, to the sinner. He was happy to engage with those that the religious leaders of his day would not engage with. And as I've mentioned in the past, my great fear at this time is that those who are unvaccinated will somehow become the new unclean. And we really need to resist that as much as we can. So we've got this inclusion of all idea. We need to be welcoming of all people as the people of God. The other priority that we've had to take into account is that of public health and safety. And friends, love of neighbour actually demands that we take into account public health and safety, because love does no harm to its neighbour. And so we want to make sure that as a church that we don't actually conduct ourselves in a way that actually causes harm to others. Now, as I reflect upon our discussions, really what we have sought to do through all of this is we're in situations where we see there's high risk, we've had to minimise inclusion. But in situations where there is minimal risk, we have sought to make sure that we are being inclusive. We cannot eliminate risk. All we can do is to minimise it. And we certainly have sought to do that in our discussions. Now, we received quite a bit of input to help us in our discussions. Obviously, the government has provided input. The COVID Safe Plan that we have been given has certainly helped us to think through that. We also received a briefing from the diocese last Tuesday, so Morris Daniel and I, and that was helpful. But we also received input from 87 of our church members. That was 87 of our church members who completed the survey that we asked you to complete about vaccination. So can I say a big thank you to all of you who completed that survey, not just answering the questions, but providing the comments that you did. So all of those things, what the government said, what the diocese said, what you said, fed in to our decision-making process. But let me now walk you through the government's different lockdown sort of phases and what changes at our church as we come to each of those phases. And so first of all, we come to what will happen at 70% double dose, which is expected around October 11. And first of all, I can announce that our buildings will be allowed to reopen for church gatherings only for those who have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, with the amount of people allowed in our buildings being determined by the 4 metre square rule. So in terms of the church building here, that means that we can have about 40 people in the church building, 35 up in the hall, 9 in the meeting room. So we're going to be allowed to reopen our buildings, but only for those who are vaccinated. How will this impact upon our church services? Well, this brings me to my next point. Our 8:30am and 10:30am Sunday services will reopen. Attendance will only be possible for those who have booked in. Now, we expect the 70% double dose sort of time to last for 2 weeks. And so effectively, church will be book-in only for those who are vaccinated only, but on October 17 and October 24. Now, if you would like to book in to come to church on one or both of those occasions, then please send me an email or give me a call, and I will most certainly book you in. Some might wonder why we are opening our church services at this point when our Archbishop advised us that maybe the 80% phase would be the best time. Our thought was that it would be good to have a couple of weeks to really have a sort of a soft relaunch to enable us to make sure all of our processes are working properly before we sort of open up fully again. So that's why we decided to do that. The next thing to let you know about is that congregational singing will not be permitted at our 8:30 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Sunday services, and that will also be the case during the 80% phase. The next thing to let you know about is that our Sunday children's and youth programs will run during our 10:30 a.m. services in an outdoor setting. Attendance will only be possible for those children and youth who have or have been booked in. So we will run activities for our children and youth on October 17 and 24. Again, they need to be booked in. They need to be outdoors, and the reason why they need to be outdoors is because the Public Health Order stipulates that children can only be indoors with their fully vaccinated parents, and so if they're not going to be with their parents, they need to be in an outdoor setting. Next thing to note is that Bible study groups and Open Door will be permitted to meet on the church property, but only those who have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19 will be permitted to attend. Now, in terms of Bible study groups, if you want to use the church building or the church hall to meet in that 70% phase, then please give me a call, and I'll most happily try and accommodate you as best as we can. Don't forget that during this time, and really, unless we hear otherwise to the end of the year, we're going to have to wear masks whenever we're gathered in our church buildings or in our church hall. Let's now have a look at what will happen when at 80% double dose, expected October 25. And so first of all, anyone who has been fully vaccinated against COVID-19 will be permitted to attend our 8:30 a.m. Sunday services. This requirement will be reviewed at the end of 2021. So we are stipulating here that until the end of 2021 at least, that our 8:30 a.m. service will be for vaccinated people only, for fully vaccinated people only. Why have we made this stipulation? Well, if you have a look at the results of the question that we asked in the survey about whether or not people would be willing to return to church if unvaccinated people were present, you can see that there are a few people who said, no, we're not willing. And what we discovered as we sort of dug down into the age profiles was that around 10 of those people were from the 50 to 69 age bracket, and 12 of them were in the 70 and above age bracket. So obviously those who are more mature in years in our congregation are feeling a bit more fearful about coming back to church. So we want to try and help you, if you're fearful, to be able to come back by setting aside a service which will be for fully vaccinated people only. Our Archbishop, in a letter that he sent out to rectors and wardens during the week, indicated that he very much supported such an idea. And so we think it's a good way to try and encourage people to come back to church, those who are fearful, those who are in the more vulnerable kind of categories, to be able to come back in a situation where risk is minimised. Again, we'll review that requirement at the end of 2021. The next thing to tell you is that morning tea will be permitted after our 8:30 a.m. Sunday services. So those who come to 8:30 who are fully vaccinated will be able to gather together after the service over morning tea. The next thing to let you know about is that anyone, no matter their vaccination status, will be permitted to attend our 10:30 a.m. Sunday services. So at that 80% double dose, the government has indicated that unvaccinated people can come to church. And whilst we're saying that 8:30 a.m. will be vaccinated only, anyone can come to our 10:30 a.m. services. Also, any children and youth will be permitted to attend our Sunday children's and youth programs running during our 10:30 a.m. services, with the groups permitted to meet indoors. So at the 70% phase, they have to meet outdoors. At 80%, they can now meet indoors. And so let me just emphasise that at the 80% phase, you do not need to book in for 8:30 or 10:30. You can turn up, but 8:30 you must be fully vaccinated. The next thing to let you know about is that Bible study groups, Clem's Kids, Punk and Playtots will be permitted to meet on the church property with no attendance restrictions based on COVID-19 vaccination. And the next thing to let you know about is that only those who have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19 will be permitted to attend open door on church property. So in the 80% phase, most of our groups will have started to run again. Let's now focus on what is going to happen between December 1 and 31. So December 1 is really, in terms of our government's roadmap, the time when everything really opens up. So the first thing to let you know about is this: that the amount of people allowed in our buildings will be determined by the 2 metre square rule. So that means that in our church building, we'll be able to have around 80 people in here instead of 40. So that opens up the fact that we can have more people in this space. Next thing to let you know about is that our 1 p.m. service will reopen. I'm particularly excited about that. I love our 1 p.m. service. I love all of our services. But why are we waiting until December, and it'll be December 5, to reopen 1 p.m? Well, our 1 p.m. service occurs over a meal. And what we know is that during the 80% sort of double dose phase, that those who are unvaccinated will not be able to dine in restaurants and cafes. They'll only be allowed to get takeaway. And so we thought, given that 1 o'clock occurs over a meal, it would probably be best for us to follow the government regulations about restaurants and cafes and only to start 1 o'clock at the time when people can go to restaurants and to cafes. So if you're a part of the 1 o'clock service and you really want to come to church before December, well, you can come to one of our other services. So feel free to do that. But 1 o'clock will start on the 5th of December. The next thing to let you know about is that morning tea will be permitted after our 10:30 a.m. Sunday services in an outdoor setting. So following on from the reasoning for why we're only restarting 1 o'clock in December, same thing for 10:30. Unvaccinated people will be present at 10:30 during the 80% phase, but again, they are only allowed to get takeaway, not to eat in. So morning tea will actually start in December in an outdoor setting. It'll be in an outdoor setting. We believe that will help to minimise risk. Next thing, congregational singing will be permitted at our 8:30 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. Sunday services. That's going to be great news, particularly as we come closer to Christmas. We're going to be able to sing again, so that will be great. We'll probably be singing behind masks, I must say, but the fact is we're going to be able to sing praises to our great God again at this point, so that's great. Next thing to note is that our Oasis women's group and Metal men's groups will be permitted to meet on the church property with no attendance restrictions based on COVID-19 vaccination status, and the requirements about COVID-19 vaccination status for those attending Open Door on church property will be determined by the leaders of Open Door. So up to this point, we, in the 70% and 80% phases, we have said vaccinated only for Open Door. Now we're going to allow, from December onwards, the leaders of Open Door to determine what they want to do at that point. Now, there is some information that I want to give you now about expectations of staff and volunteers. Now, in our survey, we asked the question whether you thought that all staff and volunteers should be vaccinated. And what we saw was that an overwhelming number of you thought that they should, 60 out of the 87 respondents. Now, we spent time working through that particular matter, and we concluded that it probably wasn't right to require that all of our volunteers be vaccinated. For example, do you really need to be vaccinated if you're updating our website, or running our social media pages, or mowing our lawns? We didn't think that those sorts of situations mandated vaccination. But there were some situations that we thought either mandated it, required it, or in which we will strongly request that you actually make sure that you are vaccinated. So this brings me to the first point under this part about expectations, and it's this: that it will be required that all who serve in ministries to the elderly and in food-serving ministries, including the Lord's Supper, be fully vaccinated against COVID-19, with this requirement to be reviewed at the end of 2021. So in our thinking, the high-risk sort of categories were ministering to the elderly, and the elderly are particularly vulnerable, we know, and anything to do with the service of food. So anyone involved in those particular types of ministries, we will require that you be vaccinated. Now, the other area where really we spent most of our time discussing this matter was the issue of vaccination for those who are children's and youth leaders. Now, we certainly noted that there was concern amongst a number of people. In the survey, we asked whether people were willing to allow their children or those in their care to go to groups at church where unvaccinated leaders might be present. Now, as we looked at the numbers for that, which you can see on your screen at the moment, it is worth noting that only around about 5 to 6 people were in what we consider to be the parent sort of age range. The rest of them were grandparents in that grandparent age range, and probably should have said, this question doesn't apply to me, because we certainly don't have the amount of people that answered no sending their grandkids to events at our church. But still, we took note that there are some grandparents who do, and there's about half a dozen people in that parent age range who had concerns about sending their kids. We also noted, though, as we talked through this issue, that the risk for children, say compared to the elderly, of getting very sick or needing hospitalisation or death, is much, much lower than it is for the elderly. We also noted that at the 80% phase, when it comes to Sundays, that children are going to be around unvaccinated people anyway, and particularly in December when morning tea starts, unvaccinated people will be present where children are. So as we kind of weighed up all of those sorts of things, we came to this conclusion: that it will be strongly requested that all who serve in ministries to children and youth be fully vaccinated against COVID-19, This request does not apply to those who minister to children and youth in schools because it is mandatory for such people to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So, this is probably the highest that we could get without actually requiring it. And so I want to really state clearly to all who are involved in children and youth ministry that it is our very strong preference that you be vaccinated. We want you to take into account the concerns that some parents have. And so we strongly urge you to get vaccinated. But we're not mandating it. And so, if this request is refused, then alternative risk reduction strategies accepted by the wardens, for example, a rapid antigen test, will be permitted. And this whole policy will be reviewed at the end of 2021. So again, we recognise that there are parents who are concerned about their kids being with leaders who are unvaccinated. And so if we have any leaders who are unvaccinated, we will be insisting on things like a rapid antigen test in order to try and help parents' minds be at ease about these sorts of matters. Again, this was a particular issue. We probably spent, out of the 3 or so hours that we met for last Wednesday night, this issue of children's and youth leaders, we probably spent an hour discussing that particular issue alone. And again, I want to urge all of those who are children's and youth leaders, it is our strong opinion as a parish council that we want to see you vaccinated, but if you're not willing to be vaccinated, we will be insisting on other risk reduction measures. Now, just a few more pieces of information as I finish up. First of all, we want to make sure that our property is a thoroughly clean property as a part of minimising risk. And so we need more and more people to be involved in helping to clean the church property. So if you can actually assist with cleaning of the church property, then please get in touch with me. Being a COVID-safe organisation means being a clean organisation. And so the more people who can help with that, the better. If you have any feedback or questions about the things that we have spoken about, that I've spoken about this morning, then please feel free to come back to me or to one of our wardens about that. We recognise that not everyone will agree with the steps that we have taken here, but I want to assure you that these matters have not been treated at all lightly by us. We have treated them with the utmost of seriousness. We have sought to balance well our need to be inclusive of all, but also to make sure that we are maintaining good standards of public health and safety in what we're doing. Again, we cannot eliminate the risk, but we are trying as best as we can to minimise the risk, because we want all of you, as the people of God, to start gathering with us again.